We're on lesson 3 of chapter 2, which asks us to subtract integers. We're going to subtract integers by adding the opposite and then evaluating expressions with integers as well. The idea about the adding the opposite, so let's say I did 3 minus 8. If I started up at positive 3 and I needed to subtract 8. Normally, when you add 8, you're going to be moving to the right 8 spots from positive 3. But you're taking away those 8 spots to the right. So actually taking away spots to the right makes you move to the left. You'd actually have to move 8 spots to the left to subtract a positive 8, which would put you at negative 5. So the idea behind this is that you're going to be adding the opposite whenever you have subtraction of integers. It's the best way to solve these problems. So instead of 3 minus 8, you would do 3 plus, what's the opposite of positive 8? Negative 8. So you're adding the negative 8. And this is just like what we did last lesson. It's just an extra step now. So same thing over here. We have negative 4 minus a positive 2. We would do negative 4 plus, and then a negative 2. And then we could solve that just like last time. Are they the signs same or are signs different? Let's look at some problems and let's actually do this. Here we have 5 minus 9. So let's ask ourselves, so we have subtracting 9, how do we add the opposite? Let's do 5 plus, okay, what's the opposite of positive 9? That would be negative 9. So 5 minus 9 turns into 5 plus negative 9. Right? So are the signs the same? We have a positive, we have a negative, so they're different, right? That means they're playing for different teams. Which team wins, the positives or the negatives? Well, the 9 has a higher absolute value, so the negatives win. By how much? By 4, right? 9 is 4 bigger than 5. So our answer would be negative 4. Let's do this one. Negative 9 minus negative 2. Here we go. So we'd have negative 9, and then we're going to add the opposite. So we do add instead of subtract, and now we have negative 2. What's the opposite of negative 2? That would be positive 2. So we have negative 9 and positive 2. Which one wins? Well, the negatives win again. By how much? 9 is 7 bigger than 2, so it would be a negative 7 for our answer. Here we have negative 4 minus 3. So we'll start with negative 4. Let's add instead of subtract. And then what's the opposite of positive 3? That would be negative 3. And I like to put that in parentheses just to, always it's kind of confusing having two signs in a row like that. We have negative and a negative. They're the same sign, so they're same team, right? Add those values and keep the negative. Negative 4, negative 3, that would also be negative 7. Let's do some of these problems with expressions then. We have a minus b, and then we need to plug in these values for a and b. So we have negative 6 for a, and then we're subtracting b, which is 7. So negative 6 minus 7. So if we're going to be adding the opposite, we would say negative 6 plus, remember adding, and then opposite of positive 7 would be negative 7. The signs are the same, correct? A negative and a negative, so they're both on the negatives. Our answer would be then 6 plus 7, which is negative 13. Remember, add those absolute values. We have positive 14 for A, minus, and now we have B, which is negative 9. So let's write that negative 9 in there. Remember, I don't like having two signs together without a parentheses. That helps me. So if we're going to add the opposite, then we'd have 14. Add instead of subtract. The opposite of negative 9 is positive 9. And this turned a lot easier here. I have 14 plus 9, which gives me 23. Let's do a real-world application then. We said find the difference between 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit and negative 250 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperatures that the space shuttle must endure. That's a huge difference. So we say 3,000. That's the biggest. It says find the difference. Remember, that's a subtraction problem. So we need to subtract and then subtract negative 250. And then we're going to be putting, I like to put parentheses around the negative 250. So this is the same thing as we did before. We need to add the opposite. So we do 3,000 now. And then instead of subtracting, we add. And we do the opposite of negative 250, which is positive 250. Then we can add that together, which would give me, if you do it in your head or in your calculator, 3,250. And that makes sense because 3,000 is 3,250 away from negative 250 in a number line, if you actually had a number line that was big enough to show that. And that's what the difference is. You find how far away they are from each other on a number line.